Hey there, internet strangers. Let's talk about those huge guts that we spilled in the Ancient Gods Part 2. So I'm not really going to format this in just like a list of positives and negatives. I'm going to go about it in an order that makes sense to me, and there will of course be timestamps below so you can skip around to whatever part you want to. That said, let's hop into the new stuff, starting with the enemies. First up, in order of appearance, is the Screecher. This purple Power Ranger psychic type Pokemon, whatever the heck it is actually super interesting to me, and I love its addition. It has an interesting effect, turning enemies into somewhere between a buff totem and a spirit, and I love the element of skill and player choice that it adds in deciding if you're going to set it off or not. Or not so much deciding and accidentally doing it, at least if you're me. I think that it limits player choice in the most interesting way possible by actually giving the player more choices. Yes, it can limit the weapons that you can use if you have to be precise if you don't want to set it off, or you can just go loud and fast and blow everything up and know that you're going to be fighting tougher enemies. 10 out of 10. Next up, we got the big boy, the Armored Baron, and I love this guy. He combines one of my favorite systems in the game, the weak point system, with one of my favorite pressure units in the game, the Baron. Now when I first saw this guy, I thought he would work way more similarly to the Cybermancubus, who, like me, can be punched once, all of his clothes fall off, or in this case armor, and it's gone for good, and then he pees himself. I was super relieved that they didn't add an electric dance floor to this guy to make him more of a pressure unit, but instead, the recharging mechanic of the armor makes him just as high as a priority as if it did. Because you have such a limited amount of time to destroy his armor in one cycle before it comes back, you almost have to prioritize him even harder than you would if it was just a regular Baron. Overall, works even better than I expected. I love that there's more than one option to remove the armor with the Meme Beam as well, and it's just a great addition. Next up, the Cursed Prowler, and this green teleporter tit bag is so confusing to me. Some fights, I want him removed from the game entirely, and then other fights that he's there, I never even notice him. If he ever does hit you and sucks you into his little blood punch minigame, it's really jarring, and it essentially removes you completely from the Doom combat loop that you're used to. It's now like you're playing the hellified version of Luigi's Mansion. Fitting that it is against the only demon that can teleport through walls and stuff, actually. And I can't decide if that is a good or a bad thing. The one thing that it definitely does right and fulfills its purpose in is that it is a high value, high priority target. In arenas that I know that they're in now, as opposed to my first few playthroughs, where I was getting hit by them all the time, I now just make sure that they don't have a chance. I want to hate these guys, but I also sort of love them because they are definitely impactful. And that's kind of the best word that you can use to describe any enemy in Doom. So, you're welcome for the super in-depth commentary there. In 6 months, I'll have my mind made up and we can talk about it then. Moving on to the Stone Imp, a great example of moderate strength in numbers. These guys never really have kill pressure on you, but they do make you use ammo on them. They're fun, and their rolling attack is interesting and can put pressure on you when in large groups or with other dangerous enemies around. But as much time as you spend in the air in Ancient Gods Part 2, they're not a huge issue. They can come rolling up to you like Sonic and you can just get out of the way. These guys are also super let down by the fact that the chain gun shield one-taps them with dashes. I really hope that that's a bug and that gets resolved. Otherwise, these guys fall drastically in both their fun level to fight against and their level of impact. Overall, I like their addition, I like having the variation, and I really like the tankiness and extra shotgun shells. Moving on then to possibly the most hyped enemy of the entire DLC by the community, the Chain Gunners, or officially the Riot Soldiers. These unbreakable shieldy boys are a letdown. While their unbreakable shield should have led to some really cool combat encounters, their AI is dumber than Ed, Edd and Eddy, they're less accurate than Stormtroopers, and they move less than Rosa Parks. Oddly enough, they're also never really paired with other dangerous enemies, which is a bit of a disappointment, but given the circumstances, I don't know if it would have been any more engaging anyway, as they end up just being, to me at least, you can find a method that you like to kill them, sticky bomb bait for a free glory kill, and hammer recharge. I have a tinfoil hat theory that there's a version of these guys that behaves much more similarly to the regular shielded soldier, but they felt like that was too strong, so they nerfed them, made them more lazy, basically, and maybe even took some of their placements out of the levels. I have no way to prove that, obviously, but when put it next to the rest of the demon cast, these guys just feel really out of place at the moment. Speaking of things that feel out of place and like filler rather than content, the Amorian Soldier. And I'm not going to bother talking about these guys since id didn't bother finishing their animation sets. So let's move on to some final thoughts about the enemy cast here. I'm more excited about some of their potential for nasty combinations in future master levels rather than how they were used strictly in this DLC. Overall, I'm actually more satisfied with the additions of these demons than I was with those added in Ancient Gods Part 1, which I have a review of on the channel if you would like to check it out. Despite the fact that a lot of them felt like reskins, one felt nerfed and another felt completely unfinished. I don't know, life is weird sometimes, and I'm still holding out hope, crossing fingers that we get to see that unreleased Maker Super Heavy in a future update, even if that's super doubtful. But I'm a happy slayer. Let's move on to other new stuff. The other new big thing that was added in this DLC, the Hellbreaker. Oh boy, the hammer. I know for most people, this is the item that is like the selling point or the breaking point of this DLC. So I'll start here. I think the hammer is a ton of fun to use. I've had the dumbest smile on my face most of the time while I'm playing with this thing, and that smile hasn't really faded on subsequent playthroughs. It still is fun to get a bunch of air, slam down on a group of 15 demons, and make blood and guts go everywhere. That's a lot of words if you don't know what the story of the game is. We're killing things that are bad, and it makes me happy. You know what? We're hammering. Oh, boom! That's so stinking fun. The problem, or maybe more accurately, the question, is that is being fun more important than it being healthy for the game? On my first playthrough, I really underused the hammer. I don't really play for glory kills, I'm kind of treated it more like the Crucible, but on subsequent playthroughs, especially if you base your playstyle around the hammer, it becomes truly broken. And that's even before all the upgrades. Once you get all of them, it is woefully broken. If you have your brain turned on at all, you can pretty much have this thing activated all the time, and it makes it where you don't really even have to move in circularities anymore, which is pretty dangerous in an arena shooter. We're going to talk about the arenas in a second, where you move. Movement is a huge part of the game. With the hammer, you can just sort of let enemies group up on you, and as soon as they would normally be about to start overrunning you, you can just flame belch and hammer smash and be full on everything and have the hammer again in 3 seconds. It feels really cool, it makes you feel powerful, it's fun, but I think at least some of that fun comes from the knowledge that you should not be able to get away with the playstyle that you are playing. The hammer basically ensures that you are able to bully any demon from any range now, which before, obviously there's some demons that you're safer up close to than others, and some that you can deal all the damage you need to from far away, and that variable range is part of the Doom dance that you need to fight enemies from, but with the hammer, that part of the dance is just kind of lost. I've never felt that something fit the vibe, the flow, the play of a game so well, but also gets in the way of the things that makes that game great. To kind of wrap this all together, the way that I look at it is this. I truly do love that the stinking hammer exists and the time that I get to use it in this DLC, but I hope that I never see it again outside of this DLC. Maybe in a stupidly hard master level that they add later that's balanced around this. I'll look forward to that, but that's about it. Alright, before we move on to the big ticket boss fight with the Dark Lord, let's speedrun some arena reviews. Level 1, the World Spear. First up, they found a way to make a goo fight that did not suck, and I'm super happy about it. If you want a fun challenge, you can try it with no BFG, no shields, and no grenades later, just for the heck of it, then come back here and comment how it goes, because I had a great time. Next up is the first room after you pick up the hammer. This thing was so well designed in my opinion. It's just enough cramped and annoying areas where you kind of not are forced to, but are encouraged to use the hammer, and then just enough airtime for you to float around and go bananas. They throw 2 tyrants at you. It's a great time. Next up is the area with the trees. It's weird to think about this as an arena, but it's one of the few areas in the game with collision or obstacles to have to shoot around, and it's weirdly flat to be fun, but with the meat hook point in the middle and the super duper floaty teleporter, I had a great time here. Then you get the escalation encounter arena, just a big open arena with teleporters and jump pads. Lots of fun. Nothing special to report though. This level does have a ton of like trap rooms where you walk in and you think you're about to just walk through to the next hallway and they block the door and throw a bunch of things at you. Not really arenas, but a lot of fun. On to level 2, we're back on Earth now. And I initially really hated the first arena of this level, but I've come to love it on subsequent playthroughs. If you use the jump pads from the bottom level, you're likely to hit your head on the level above you instead of making it up to it. It's generally not the easiest to move around in because things are just out of ledge grab height, and you sort of get funneled into a central hallway where there's usually a pain elemental and a tyrant or baron blocking everything. But this awkward central hallway is actually a really fun mess. The arena is literally a ramped figure 8 destruction derby course, but instead of old school buses and crapped out cars, it's for Demon Flesh, and people are going to have some super nutty Destroyer Blade plays here in the future, and I look forward to seeing them. Next up is the Escalation Area Arena, and for essentially being a square with 3 levels stacked on top of each other, this arena is actually really well designed. Thanks to its super cramped design and a Marauder, it's one of the few arenas in this expansion that truly forces you to move still while you have the hammer. The spirited Pinky fight in the subway is tight, good fun, not really an arena, and all the hallway fights in this level are super fun, but the next arena that's really worth talking about is the one right at the end, where you have all the horizontal jump pads in a sort of triangular shaped arena. This arena seems really plain at first, but then the movement that you're able to get out of it, even though it's rather small, is impressive thanks to the jump pads being so different from the ones that you're used to. It's also one of the few ones in the game that I would describe as having depth rather than verticality, because you come into the arena and there's the option to drop down up to 3 stories in kind of a central shaft, rather than having monkey bars and other things overhead as usual. Now onto level 3, Amora. This is visually the most impressive level of the expansion, but it kind of only has 2 real arenas. This one thrives on the fights in between, some of them being really great, and then some of them being not as great, looking at you, Amorian soldiers. But we'll start with the Escalation Encounter Arena. I found myself really just working the outskirts on this one. There is a covered area in the middle that you can go under, but it's not really worth doing because you can just kind of kite everything with the jump pad. Basically, it's a fun arena to be in the air the whole time, even if it's not super special. And then for the final arena, this one's very large, and it dead ends into jump pads at several different locations, and it's realistically 2 main levels, and then there's like some 3rd tier stuff on the edges, so you have some options, but I don't love this one. This is probably where you get thrown the toughest enemies in combination in the game, but it's so large that you're able to just kind of outrun everything. One cool feature though, on the central platform it does have see-through kind of fences, so you can use them as cover while being able to see your enemies through them. Okay, we put it off for long enough. Let's talk about this Dark Lord fight, and I'll try to keep it short. I was really intrigued by the idea of fighting your, quote, equal from the dark side, basically. But it didn't really feel like that's what was happening. The Dark Lord didn't feel anything like what I would describe the Doomslayer as. He wasn't mobile, he wasn't particularly lethal, and worst of all, he just wasn't fun. Let's break this down a bit before I really just give my opinion. The game drops you into a big circle where you essentially are playing the Marauder game with a green eye flash. Which isn't to say that that system could not have worked, but in this case it just doesn't. It feels lame that the only time you can actually damage this great enemy of yours is when he's standing completely still with a stun icon above his head. That's not to say that this fight was easy by any means, it wasn't. My first playthrough on this, I got my butt handed to me repeatedly, up until I learned to differentiate between the Dark Lord's moves. But once you figure out that his green eye attack starts with him stepping what is to our left leg first, and learn some dodge timings, it becomes simple. It essentially makes the first 3 stages out of 5, which is already way too many, a repeatable cakewalk that can be cleared in less than 2 minutes each. But then you get to phase 4 and 5. The dance doesn't change at all. You're still just waiting for a green eye flash that you can try to force by standing a little closer, but then he does his other melee attacks. You have to dodge, otherwise he heals. But he becomes more lethal because he spawns super heavies. Granted, these super heavies have reduced health, they can easily be taken out with the Unmaker or a BFG shot, or just handled normally, but it's something that you have to take your eyes off of the Dark Lord for sometimes, and then he will show up, essentially at your back door with prox bombs, the shield bash, and a big sword, to damage you and to regain his own health. That's not to say that he's super lethal. You can fairly easily recover just by swinging around the outside with the meat hook and glory killing the zombies that are there. This process just unnecessarily extends this fight so much. On my last testing playthrough of this fight, I cleared the first 3 phases and I said like less than 2 minutes, but then the next one was 11 minutes and then 14 minutes. Because you don't want to screw up, it just takes so long. And this experience obviously won't be universal, but it's one that's repeatable through several playthroughs of it for me. You combine this with the fact that you have little to no control over the pacing of the fight due to waiting for the green eye flash, and it just becomes frustrating. Then, on top of all that, the fight doesn't seem to function 100% of the time. I'll use getting the initial stun with the chain gun as an example. Sometimes it seems like the first instance of damage is what actually causes the stun, and then I'm able to start the combo. And others, it seems like it's the 4th to 6th chain gun shot that actually causes him to stun. Other times, you'll go to ground slam him with the hammer, but if you get too close to him, the stun won't go off, even if he's damaged. That sometimes works and sometimes doesn't and does different things. He didn't get stunned! What the? Lastly, you throw in small and less repeatable weird things like getting hit while you're chainsawing a zombie and him life-stealing off of it even though you're invulnerable.
But locked onto the wrong person, so I'll never know. Did he get heals? He did get heals, even though I was invulnerable while chainsawing. What the heck, game? That can't happen.
And it's just frustrating. If it's gonna be as tight as it is balanced, it's gotta work 100% of the time. Obviously, in my testing, I found workarounds for all of these things. Use a super shotgun or a high damage single instance weapon to get the initial stun. Do the hammer slam, a good few feet away from him rather than right on his feet, and I can make it through just fine, just like anybody else could. So to wrap up thoughts on the final boss fight, it's not that it's too hard, it's not that it's too easy, but I don't think that it exceeds in either of the two areas where any game should or could succeed. It's not fun, and really, it's just not good. I feel like there's a universe that exists where they don't have to change this very much, make it work 100% of the time, make it a little bit more engaging, make the player have a little more control over when the green eye flash attack comes, where this can be good, but I still don't think it will ever be fun, even in the best case scenario. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think about this boss fight in the comments below. I think it's objectively worse than the gladiator fight. So let's wrap this up. There's a few things that I didn't think were worth their own section in this video, but I wanted to mention. I feel like this DLC had way too much BFG ammo. You could use it on essentially every fight, and then go find more. I also think that the DLC went pretty fast, and that's not really a commentary on it being good or bad, but I finished it much faster than Ancient Gods Part 1, and I died way less on a first playthrough. Next, meat hook platforming. That's a great addition, pretty much a no-brainer, and that's really all I have to say about it. It's just great. And then last random bit, it took me a little bit to make up my mind on the escalation encounter format, as opposed to secret encounters and Slayer gates. I like the fights from the second rounds of escalation encounters, but I think I miss having that one extra well-crafted arena that we would have gotten with a Slayer gate. Not that it would have been any more difficult or significantly different, I just missed having that extra arena. So then, final thoughts. Going into this DLC, I really wanted 3 things. First, I wanted more Doom. Simple enough, I wanted more of the game that I love, more locations, more demons, and those things delivered. Second, and this is kind of a 2-part thing, I wanted to have fun and be challenged. And I definitely had fun, even if the challenge was a little bit more lacking than I expected. And lastly, and I've been talking about this for months, I wanted Doom Eternal to finally nail a boss fight. We have some good boss fights, but we don't have any great ones so far, in my opinion. And now that the Doomslayer's, at least for this arc, story is officially over, I guess it just means that we won't get one. Still though, I'm more than satisfied with the content that came with this DLC, and I look forward to playing it more. We're going to be prepping for Ultra Nightmare runs, which we'll be attempting on stream if you wanted to check that out. We'll be playing Doom Eternal for a long time to come, as we look forward to more master levels and things like that in the future. But I'm going to shut up now. If you liked the video, feel free to drop it a like. If you wanted to sub, that would mean a lot as well. We will be doing lots more Doom content in the future. And make sure to let me know all the things that I got wrong in the comments section. But until then, I'll catch you internet strangers in the next one.